My name is Ioana, and together with my colleague, we'll tell you a bit about a pilot project that we are running at this moment. This project focuses on the practice of microdosing among students enrolled in higher education, especially in Dutch universities. We chose to focus on this specific target group because we were motivated to understand whether this practice reflects some institutional or social pressures to perform something that was found by studies that investigated the use among students of other neurocognitive enhancement substances like Ritalin or cannabis. Whether this was the case also when it comes to microdosing was for us thus the starting point. But then we were also interested in understanding the lived experiences of students that microdose, their motivations, and their reported effects on mood and well-being, and whether we can find evidence for the claims in the literature on the effects of microdosing on mood, creativity, or cognition. We set up to unpack these questions by designing a mixed method study that combined in-depth interviews followed by a month of measurements using experience sampling methods as well as online cognitive tests. At this moment, the data collection is completed between November 2019 and June 2020. We invited and enrolled 20 participants in the pilot, participants who already had an established practice of microdosing. And so in the remaining of this recording, I will briefly describe some preliminary results from the in-depth interviews that we conducted, and afterwards JD will tell you more about the quantitative component of the project. I was the one that conducted the interviews, and for me it was such a nice and rewarding experience that I could create a safe space for the participants who provided a very rich and dense account of their microdosing practice, their motivations, and the way it is embedded in their lives. One of the topics that we discussed in depth regarded the perceived effects of this practice on various domains, among which emotional states was the one that we discussed most in detail. And I want to just give you a taste of the accounts of our participants because these experiences are very complex and we are still working through interpreting and integrating them into a comprehensive model. For now, we chose just a few that exemplify the sometimes contrasting mechanisms that are suggested to be at work. A first pattern that we deduced from the interviews was the higher average positive emotional states that was reported by participants during the microdosing day. And what they meant by that was that the positive emotions that they experience, especially happiness or a feeling of being content, even though they fluctuated during the day, they did so around a higher average value. Another pattern regarded facilitation of emotional regulation. This was reported by participants that started by stating that in general, they experience quite intense negative, but also positive emotional states throughout the day. But during the microdosing day, their emotional states are not so extreme. So the range between the maximum positive and negative emotional experience was lower. However, other participants reported the opposite. During the microdosing day, their emotional states were amplified, both the positive and the negative one. Love, gratitude, feeling content were among the most frequent ones that were reported on the positive side, while anxiety was among the most reported on the negative side. And the last two patterns that we discerned in the data more directly make a link between the microdosing practice and long-term well-being. On the one hand, most participants reported an increased awareness of their emotions. They reported to note and recognize more often their emotional states. And especially noting and being aware of positive emotional states seems to be beneficial for long-term well-being because, as one participant aptly put it, it allows practicing that state of awareness also during the days without microdosing. In this respect, the practice of microdosing provided the participant with an example of being more aware and of feeling specific states of positive emotions such as awe or gratitude that they can then exercise and replicate during the off days. This effort to obtain similar effects without the use of psychedelic is a common theme in our participants' account, and it emphasizing the refusal to accept the drug as directly causing their long-term well-being. Instead, They propose their microdosing practice as support for learning how to deal with their lives in a manner that liberates them from the perils of emotional addiction to their microdosing practice.
In the quantitative part, we have aimed to create a holistic and exploratory overview of the microdosing effects that take the individual as a starting point. So over 4 weeks, we have measured sleep, substance use, habits, emotional states, daily satisfaction, authenticity, and orientations to happiness through the experience sampling method. We have combined this data with cognitive tests that tested visual and verbal memory, neuromotor processing speed, executive function, sustained attention, and working memory. All of these tests could be performed by the participants at home, and combining the ESM data with the cognitive test data created around 20 data points per person that link psychological variables, daily habits, and cognitive function. Despite the intensive data collection, the experience sampling method allowed us to collect around 500 data points in total on emotional states. While the data has not been finalized yet for a conclusive analysis, our plan for the future includes answering the following questions. How do orientations to happiness and authenticity change under the influence of low-dose classical psychedelics? How is sleep affected? And how do dynamics of emotions change during microdosing days, on one day after, and on off days? Further, we are interested in whether microdosing enhances or impairs cognitive function, and if so, under which domains. Finally, we want to check whether the individual motivations and reasons for microdosing that we have gained from the interviews hold up to quantitative analysis. To conclude, we have employed a mixed method approach. On the one hand, through qualitative interviews, which gave us an informative overview of microdosing practice, which is not restricted by theory. On the other hand, through the experience sampling method, we have collected a lot of information on participants' daily habits and psychological variables with a lot of ecological validity because they were in the natural environment that they usually behave in. So finally, I want to thank you for your attention. If you want further information on the study, you can download the poster, first of all, and feel free to contact us for any other questions.